The galaxy had been at war for centuries. Different species fought for control, resources, and power. The battlefield spread across countless planets, with each victory and defeat shaping the future of the universe. Humans, though they were relatively young in comparison to the older species, had proven themselves fierce and capable. Yet, despite their courage, they found themselves at the center of a huge decision that would change everything. The Great War was finally over. A peace treaty was signed by the leaders of all the major species in the galaxy. The Galactic Council had declared it. Peace for all. It was a momentous occasion. For years, the galaxy had been waiting for this day, a day where weapons would be put down, where people would no longer fear invasion or destruction. The celebrations began almost immediately. Music, light shows, and fireworks filled the skies above every major planet. But as the galaxy cheered, not all were celebrating. One planet, Earth, was silent. President Morgan stood on the balcony of the Earth government building, gazing out at the stars. She was supposed to be at the celebration, making a speech about the future of humanity. But as the fireworks lit up the sky, she felt a sinking feeling in her heart. Earth had been left out. The human race was nowhere to be found in the peace deal. The leaders of the galaxy had signed a treaty that would change everything, but humans had been forgotten. It wasn't that Earth had not been invited to the peace talks. They had been there, sitting quietly, watching as the alien representatives from every corner of the galaxy signed agreements that would guarantee their prosperity. Earth's representatives were given nothing more than vague promises. The human race, despite all of their advancements, was treated as if they were insignificant. The peace deal is for everyone, the alien ambassadors had said, their words cold and distant. But humanity, they need to prove they can be trusted. They have their own problems. Let them handle their own affairs. President Morgan's mind raced. She knew exactly what that meant. Earth had been excluded because the galaxy's leaders feared humanity. They were afraid of Earth's potential, the power that could rise if humans united. But they didn't understand. Humanity was more than just their military strength. It was their resilience, their ability to rise above any challenge, that made them a threat. The rest of the galaxy celebrated, but the humans were left to wonder. How could peace be for all if they weren't included? Was this really peace, or was it just another form of control? The people on Earth watched the celebrations through their screens, but they felt more isolated than ever before. They were left out of the galaxy's future, forgotten in the wake of a grand declaration of peace. President Morgan turned away from the window. She had to act. She had to find out why humans were ignored. It wasn't just about the pride of Earth. It was about survival. The galaxy had already been at war for so long, and now, with the peace treaty in place, there was a new threat on the horizon. If humanity wasn't part of this new era, they might not survive the consequences. The first step was to gather the government's top advisors. She called for an emergency meeting, and within hours, the brightest minds from Earth were assembled in a conference room. People from every field, diplomacy, science, military strategy, came together to discuss the situation. "We've been left behind," one of the top diplomats said, his voice sharp. "The other species are forming alliances, creating trade routes, and securing their place in the future. Meanwhile, we're stuck with nothing." "I don't believe this was a mistake," President Morgan replied. "This was deliberate. The galaxy's leaders fear us. They see humanity as a wild card. We've shown that we can achieve things that others can't even dream of, and that scares them." Another advisor, a military strategist, nodded. "If we're left out, we'll fall behind. We'll become irrelevant. Our technology, our resources, they won't matter if we're isolated. We need to act fast, or we'll be forgotten for good." President Morgan's face was grim. She knew they were right. The galaxy's leaders had made their decision. Humanity wasn't invited to the new world they were creating. Earth wasn't included in this grand peace, But that didn't mean it was the end for humanity. As the meeting ended, President Morgan stood alone by the window, looking at the peaceful stars above. But she knew that the peace they had just declared was fragile. The galaxy's future might be built on unity, but Earth's future was about to be decided by one thing: whether humanity would accept being forgotten or fight to be remembered. Tomorrow, she would make her move. Earth would not be left behind. Humanity had been overlooked, but they wouldn't stay silent. Not this time. The fireworks continued in the distance, but to President Morgan, they felt distant and cold, like a world that had no place for her people. The real fight was just beginning. The peace that had been promised across the galaxy was not as peaceful as it seemed. As the weeks passed, the celebrations began to fade, and reality started to set in. While the rest of the galaxy flourished under the new peace treaty, Earth felt more isolated than ever. The leaders of other species began to form new alliances, create economic partnerships, and share technological advancements with each other. Earth, however, was left behind. President Morgan sat in her office late one evening, staring at the stars through the large window. She could hear the distant hum of the city below, a reminder of the daily struggles that Earth faced. People were starting to ask questions. Why were they excluded from the peace deal? Why had they been forgotten? The rest of the galaxy was moving forward, but humanity seemed stuck in a moment of uncertainty. Her thoughts were interrupted when her chief advisor, Captain Ilara, entered the room. Ilara was one of the brightest military minds Earth had ever known, but she had always been calm and composed, until now. She looked troubled, as if something weighed heavily on her mind. President Morgan, Ilara began, her voice steady but tinged with concern. I've been analyzing the aftermath of the peace treaty. There's something you need to know. Morgan turned in her chair, her gaze sharp. What is it? The galaxy's leaders are making moves that could leave us vulnerable, Ilara said. While they celebrate their peace, they're building new defense systems, strengthening their borders, and securing resources. Without us, Earth is being shut out of all the major trade routes. We've been forgotten, not just in the peace treaty, but in every new development that's taking place. Morgan's heart sank. She had feared this moment. The galaxy had made peace, but it wasn't a peace that included humanity. It was a peace that left Earth on the outside, watching as everyone else moved forward. We can't just sit here and wait, Morgan said, her voice rising with determination. We need to act. Ilara nodded. I've already begun contacting our allies within the galaxy. Some of them are sympathetic to our cause, but others, they're too focused on their own prosperity to care about Earth. The trade deals that were once in our favor are now being reallocated to other species. Humanity is being pushed aside, and no one is noticing. Morgan felt the weight of those words. It wasn't just the peace deal. It was everything that came after it. The economic collapse that Earth was facing was not a simple matter. It was the beginning of a slow erosion of everything humanity had worked for. Earth had always been a powerhouse of innovation, a place where great minds came together to solve problems. Now, without the support of the galactic community, humanity's future was uncertain. We need to show them that Earth matters, Morgan said, standing up. We need to remind them that we are not a species to be ignored. Over the next few days, Morgan worked tirelessly, organizing meetings with key officials and military leaders. There was no time to waste. The longer Earth remained excluded from the galactic community, the more difficult it would be to reclaim their position. She knew that the galaxy's leaders had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to survive, and to thrive under pressure. As Morgan and her team dug deeper into the situation, they uncovered something disturbing. It wasn't just that humanity had been left out of the peace treaty. There were whispers that the other species had deliberately excluded Earth. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. Humanity had been kept out of the peace process because the galaxy's leaders feared what Earth could become. They feared the human spirit. It was true. Earth had a unique ability to rise from its darkest moments. Time and time again, Humanity had faced challenges that seemed impossible to overcome, and each time, they had emerged stronger. The galaxy's leaders saw this as a threat. They worried that if humanity were given the same resources, the same opportunities, they would soon dominate the galaxy. They didn't want that. But Earth wasn't going to back down. Morgan knew that the time had come for humanity to take a stand. They had been forgotten by the galaxy's leaders, but they would not be ignored any longer. President Morgan called for a broadcast to the people of Earth. It was time for the truth to be revealed. The world needed to know what had really happened in the peace talks. Humanity needed to know that they were not alone, that they were not forgotten. The human race had always been resilient, and now was the time to prove it. As she stood before the camera, Morgan's voice was strong, steady, and full of conviction. "My fellow humans," she began, her words reaching every corner of Earth. "The galaxy has declared peace, but at a great cost. We have been left out, excluded from the very future that the other species are now building. But do not think for a moment that this means we are defeated. No, this is not the end of humanity. It is the beginning of our rise." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We will not sit idly by while the galaxy moves forward without us. We have always been a people of innovation, of strength, of resilience. And now we will show the galaxy exactly what it means to be human." Her words echoed across Earth, filling every home, every city, and every mind. The call to action was clear. Humanity was not going to be forgotten. It was time to stand up and claim their place in the galaxy. The challenge was just beginning, but President Morgan was determined that Earth would not be left behind. The rest of the galaxy might have forgotten about humanity, but humanity would never forget who they were and what they could achieve. As the days turned into weeks, President Morgan's frustration grew. Despite her best efforts, the galaxy's leaders remained indifferent to Earth's plight. The peace treaty had been signed, and the rest of the galaxy seemed to move forward with their new alliances and prosperous deals, while Earth's people were left in a state of limbo. What was once a thriving planet, rich in resources and culture, was now slowly being pushed into the shadows. Morgan's team had been working around the clock, gathering intel, analyzing the political landscape of the galaxy, and seeking out potential allies. They had expected resistance from other species, but what they found was far more troubling. It wasn't just that Earth was left out of the peace deal, it was that Earth was being systematically excluded from everything that mattered. Trade routes, scientific collaboration, even the most basic diplomatic channels were now closed off. The galaxy's leaders, who had once celebrated humanity's achievements, now treated Earth as if it were an afterthought. The new alliances formed between species were being built without humanity in mind. Resources, technologies, and opportunities that Earth once had access to were now being redirected to the other planets, leaving humanity struggling to catch up. At the heart of this exclusion was something more sinister than just a lack of consideration. It was fear. The more President Morgan and her advisors dug into the situation, the clearer it became. Earth's rise in power and innovation had been viewed as a potential threat by the other species. They feared that, if humanity were given the same opportunities and resources as everyone else, Earth's rapid development could upset the fragile balance of power that had been established. Captain Ilara, Morgan's trusted military advisor, was the first to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy. She had been speaking to informants within the galaxy's diplomatic network, and what she learned sent a chill down her spine. "It's not just about us being left out," Ilara said, pacing back and forth in the strategy room. "It's about what they're doing behind the scenes. There are factions within the Galactic Council, powerful factions, that have been working to suppress humanity's growth. They've been spreading misinformation about us, claiming that humanity's aggressive nature and rapid technological advancements make us a destabilizing force. They see us as a potential rival to their power." Morgan clenched her fists, her mind racing. "So, this wasn't just an oversight. We've been deliberately kept in the dark. But why? Why now?" Ilara paused, choosing her words carefully. The galaxy is afraid of what we could become. The older species have had their time to dominate, to control the galaxy, but humanity is different. We adapt quickly. We think outside the box. We challenge the status quo. That's something they can't control. Morgan's thoughts spun as she tried to make sense of the conspiracy. The galaxy's leaders had known all along that humanity's potential could be something extraordinary. But instead of welcoming it, they had decided to keep Earth suppressed. The peace treaty was just the first step in this plan, a way to keep humanity in check, to limit their ability to grow and compete on equal footing with the more established species. What's their endgame? Morgan asked, her voice steady but filled with determination. Are they planning to isolate us completely? Ilara shook her head. It's worse than that. They want to control our future. They're slowly restricting our access to resources, technology, and trade routes. They'll starve us out, limit our access to everything that made us strong. The goal is to make us weaker, to ensure we remain dependent on the other species for survival. If they can keep us isolated, they can keep us from ever becoming a true threat. Morgan stood silently for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about diplomacy or economics anymore. It was about survival. Humanity had always been resilient, but now, the very foundation of their future was at risk. If they didn't act quickly, they could lose everything. She turned to Ilara, her eyes sharp. We need to expose this. We need to show the galaxy the truth about what's happening here. We can't let them keep us in the dark any longer. Ilara nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We've already been reaching out to some of the more neutral factions in the galaxy. Some of them are sympathetic to our cause. But it's going to take time to convince them that we're not the threat they think we are. Morgan's mind raced, formulating a plan. Time is something we don't have. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to get our message across. We need to act fast. Take control of the narrative before they can complete their plan. The following days were filled with frenetic activity. Morgan and her team worked tirelessly to gather evidence of the conspiracy and to contact other factions within the galaxy that might be sympathetic to Earth's cause. They reached out to neutral planets, hoping to form alliances with those who were not aligned with the more powerful species. These smaller planets had long been overshadowed by the larger, more dominant forces of the galaxy, but now they saw a chance to stand with Earth against the larger powers. As they prepared for a public address, Morgan's heart raced with anticipation. This was their moment. They had to show the galaxy that humanity was not just a passive player in the new peace. It was a force that would not be ignored. She knew that exposing the truth about the conspiracy would be risky. But it was the only way to make the galaxy see humanity for what it truly was. Not a threat to be feared, but a partner to be respected. The broadcast was set to air in just a few hours. The entire planet was watching, waiting for President Morgan's next move. She knew that her words would have the power to change everything, to shift the balance of power in the galaxy, and to remind humanity that they were not forgotten, not powerless, and not alone. The day of the broadcast arrived, and the tension across Earth was palpable. People gathered in their homes, in parks, and on the streets, all tuning in to hear what their president had to say. For weeks, rumors had spread about the true nature of the peace treaty, and the public was eager to hear the truth. President Morgan stood before the camera, a steady resolve in her eyes. She knew the weight of her words and the responsibility of what was about to unfold. As she spoke to the people, her voice was calm but firm, carrying a sense of purpose that could not be ignored. My fellow citizens of Earth, for too long we have been kept in the dark. For too long we have been told that peace has been declared, that the galaxy has embraced unity. But this peace, this unity, comes at a great cost. We have been excluded. We have been forgotten. But we will not be silenced. We will not remain passive in the face of this injustice. Her words rang out across the planet, echoing in the hearts of those who had long felt neglected and abandoned. The message was clear. Earth was not a passive bystander in the galactic story. Humanity had always been a force of change, of innovation, and of resilience. It was time for the galaxy to recognize that. Morgan paused for a moment, allowing the gravity of her words to settle. Then she continued, revealing the conspiracy that had been uncovered. Behind the scenes, powerful factions within the Galactic Council have been working to suppress humanity's growth. These factions fear what we could become, and they have worked to keep us weak, to limit our access to the resources and technologies that other species are freely given. They have intentionally excluded us from the peace process, and they have actively sought to undermine our place in the galaxy. The broadcast was met with shock and disbelief. People across Earth watched in awe, unsure whether they were hearing the truth or simply another manipulation of power. The rumors that had circulated for weeks now seemed to take shape, and a new understanding began to form. The galaxy's peace wasn't about inclusion. It was about control. Morgan's words continued to stir the hearts of her listeners. But I tell you now, humanity will not bow to fear. We will not be held back by those who wish to see us remain in the shadows. We will rise to meet this challenge, not with violence, but with unity, with innovation, and with the strength that is woven into the very fabric of who we are. The message was one of hope, of defiance in the face of adversity. Morgan was not asking for war or conflict. She was calling on humanity to reclaim its rightful place in the galaxy, not through force, but through the power of their intellect, creativity, and resilience. It was a rallying cry to prove to the galaxy that humanity's future was not something to be controlled by others. As the broadcast continued, Morgan unveiled a plan that would allow Earth to break free from the constraints placed upon them. She spoke of forming new alliances with neutral planets, ones that were not beholden to the larger, more powerful species. We will build our own networks, our own trade routes, and our own sources of strength. We will form partnerships with those who understand the value of human ingenuity and who are willing to stand by us as equals. Together, we will show the galaxy that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. Her words were not just a plea, they were a call to action. It was clear now that the peace humanity had been promised was a lie, and the galaxy's leaders had no intention of sharing that peace equally. But President Morgan was determined to take control of Earth's future, regardless of the opposition they faced. In the weeks that followed, Earth's efforts to establish new alliances began to take shape. Captain Ilara, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, played a crucial role in reaching out to the neutral factions that had long been overlooked. These planets, while not as powerful as the larger galactic players, had their own resources and strengths. Some had suffered under the same oppressive forces that Earth had, and they were more than willing to join in solidarity with humanity. As the newly formed coalition grew, Earth's position in the galaxy began to shift. The other species that had once excluded humanity began to take notice. They could no longer ignore the growing influence of Earth and its allies. The balance of power was changing, and it was becoming increasingly clear that humanity would not be denied. But there were still those who sought to undermine the progress that had been made. The factions within the Galactic Council, the ones who had orchestrated humanity's exclusion, were not willing to give up their hold on power without a fight. They began to exert pressure on the newly formed coalition, attempting to disrupt the growing partnerships and trade routes. But Morgan and her team were prepared for this. They knew the resistance would not be easily overcome, but they were willing to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road to securing Earth's future was far from smooth. There were setbacks, betrayals, and moments of doubt. But with each challenge, humanity grew stronger, more determined. Morgan's vision of a future where Earth stood proudly among the stars, not as a forgotten world, but as an equal in the galactic community, began to take shape. As the months passed, Earth's voice became louder. The other species could no longer pretend that humanity was insignificant. Earth was no longer a weak, isolated planet. It was a thriving force in the galaxy, with its own alliances, resources, and influence. And though the peace had been declared, it was clear now that the real battle for Earth's future was just beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once, but it would not make that mistake again. President Morgan and her team had shown that even in the face of exclusion and adversity, humanity would rise. The peace that had been declared was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would be written by the humans who refused to be forgotten. As the coalition between Earth and the neutral planets grew stronger, the political atmosphere across the galaxy became increasingly tense. There were murmurs of discontent from the more powerful factions within the Galactic Council. Their grip on the galaxy's trade routes and resources had begun to waver, and they could no longer deny the impact of Earth's newfound influence. But while many of these factions were unsettled, others began to see the potential of aligning with humanity, recognizing that their innovative approach and resilience could offer fresh perspectives and solutions to long-standing problems. President Morgan stood before a council of representatives from the neutral planets, her confidence unwavering. The room was filled with people from across the galaxy, different species, each with their own unique cultures and priorities. They had all come together, united under the banner of mutual respect and a shared vision for a more balanced galaxy. Humanity's inclusion in this new alliance was no longer a distant dream. It was now a reality. "We are not here to demand what is ours by right," Morgan began, her voice steady and clear. "We are here to forge a future where all of us can thrive, where no one is excluded, where no one is forced into the shadows. We are not looking for dominance. We are looking for partnership." Her words resonated with many in the room. Some of the species present had faced similar struggles to humanity's. They, too, had once been disregarded, forgotten by the larger powers that controlled the galaxy. To them, the idea of unity and mutual respect was not just an ideal, it was a necessity. They had been waiting for a moment like this, a chance to break free from the cycle of oppression and build something better. But there were others who were still wary. Some of the more influential factions within the Galactic Council had begun to speak out against the growing coalition. They were concerned that this new alliance could shift the balance of power too dramatically. "Humanity is unpredictable," one of the council representatives argued during a meeting. "Their rapid rise in technology and innovation has already shaken the established order. Can we really trust them to maintain the peace?" Morgan stood firm. "It is precisely because of humanity's unpredictable nature that we are valuable. We think differently. We adapt. We challenge the status quo. And in doing so, we offer the galaxy something that no one else can: progress." As tensions rose, the political climate grew increasingly polarized. Some factions saw the growing alliance as a beacon of hope, while others viewed it as a threat. And yet, despite the resistance, President Morgan remained resolute in her belief that the future of the galaxy could not be decided by the few who held power. It had to be shaped by the many. On Earth, the people were beginning to rally behind their president. The broadcasts she had given, calling for unity and the rejection of the exclusionary tactics of the Galactic Council, had struck a chord. Citizens across the planet felt a renewed sense of pride and purpose. They were no longer just passive observers in the galaxy's political game. They were active participants, shaping their own destiny. But even as the political landscape shifted, Morgan knew that Earth's position remained fragile. The larger powers of the galaxy would not give up their control easily. They would continue to use every tool at their disposal to undermine the progress that had been made. And yet Morgan believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their military might, but in their ability to inspire and unite. "We are not alone in this fight," Morgan told her team one evening, her gaze steady as she looked out over the city. "We have allies now. We have people who believe in the same values we do. The galaxy will never be the same after this, and we will be a part of that change." In the following weeks, Earth's diplomatic team worked tirelessly to establish more formal agreements with the neutral planets. They began to forge trade deals, scientific exchanges, and cultural partnerships. The promise of a new era was beginning to take shape, one where Earth was not relegated to the sidelines, but instead was a key player in the galaxy's future. However, not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. The Galactic Council continued to push back against the growing influence of Earth and its allies. They accused the coalition of destabilizing the delicate balance of power and warned of the potential consequences. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that the larger factions could no longer ignore the strength of this new coalition. Earth's progress was undeniable. The innovations coming out of the planet were turning heads across the galaxy. They had developed new methods of resource management that could revolutionize how planets interacted with their environments. Their technological advancements were surpassing those of many other species, and their commitment to peaceful collaboration was beginning to win allies even in the most unlikely places. In a crucial meeting between Morgan and several leaders of the neutral planets, a breakthrough occurred. The neutral planets, recognizing that their collective strength could shift the balance of power in their favor, agreed to form a more formalized alliance with Earth. The negotiations were tense, but Morgan's resolve and the united front of Earth's supporters proved impossible to ignore. "We are building a future where the interests of all planets are respected," Morgan stated as the new pact was signed. "This is not just about us. It's about all of us. Humanity will not take more than its share. We will share knowledge, resources, and opportunities, working together as equals." With this new alliance in place, Earth was no longer a forgotten world. It was a respected member of the galactic community, a beacon of hope for other species who had long been overlooked. But Morgan knew that this was only the beginning. There was still much work to be done. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, both external and internal. The galaxy's political landscape was shifting, and humanity would have to navigate it carefully. But one thing was certain: humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured, and it would not be denied again. The coalition between Earth and the neutral planets had now solidified, and with every passing day, it became more evident that the galaxy's power structure was changing. Earth, once disregarded, now stood at the center of a new burgeoning alliance, one built on shared values of respect, cooperation, and innovation. However, despite the progress made, there were still those who could not accept the reality of this shifting balance. The Galactic Council's factions, those who had long controlled the political and economic powers of the galaxy, were beginning to feel the pressure. They had lost their monopoly over decision-making, and their influence over the smaller planets was dwindling. While they had once been able to keep humanity in check, their inability to acknowledge Earth's rightful place in the galaxy had now become their greatest weakness. President Morgan continued to work tirelessly to build the foundation of this new galactic order, yet even as she moved forward, she couldn't ignore the underlying currents of resistance. The more powerful factions weren't going to give up their hold easily, and she knew it would only be a matter of time before they tried to destabilize the fragile peace that had been forged. But Morgan wasn't someone who gave in to fear. She believed in humanity's ability to rise to any challenge, to meet adversity head-on, and to adapt in ways others couldn't imagine. The galaxy had underestimated them before, and now she was determined to make sure they never did again. In the weeks that followed, Earth and its allies began to work on several major projects that would showcase the unity of the new coalition. They pooled their resources, focusing on scientific and technological advancements that would benefit all species, not just humanity. It was an opportunity to prove that this new alliance wasn't about power struggles. It was about shared growth, mutual prosperity, and the common good of the galaxy. One of the most ambitious projects was the creation of a new network for intergalactic communication. With so many different species scattered across the stars, the existing communication systems were inefficient and often unreliable. The new network would enable real-time communication across vast distances, allowing for better coordination and collaboration between planets. The goal was to foster understanding, break down cultural barriers, and ensure that no planet, no matter how distant, felt isolated. The effort was a massive undertaking, requiring the combined expertise of scientists, engineers, and leaders from all over the galaxy. Earth's role in the project was vital, as their advancements in quantum computing and data transmission were second to none. Working alongside their new allies, Humanity provided the technological expertise that made the project possible. As the network took shape, it became more than just a tool for communication. It became a symbol of unity. The people of Earth, once kept in the dark and excluded from galactic affairs, were now at the forefront of a project that could change the very way the galaxy operated. It was proof that humanity's unique approach to problem-solving and innovation had a place in the broader galactic community. Yet, even as this great achievement neared completion, the more powerful factions of the Galactic Council grew increasingly concerned. They had watched the progress of the Alliance with growing unease, and now they feared that humanity's influence could spread too far, too fast. They could no longer deny that Earth had become a force to be reckoned with, and the idea of humanity playing a leading role in galactic affairs was something they couldn't easily accept. Behind closed doors, the Council's most influential members began to strategize. They understood that direct confrontation might not be the best approach, as it could risk destabilizing the fragile peace that had been established. Instead, they began to look for more subtle ways to undermine the growing alliance. They began to spread misinformation, trying to sow distrust between Earth and its allies. They launched covert operations designed to create division within the coalition, hoping that if they could weaken the bonds between the neutral planets and humanity, they could stop the progress that was threatening their control. They targeted key leaders, spreading rumors of corruption and deceit, attempting to turn allies against one another. But Morgan was not blind to these tactics. She had anticipated that the established powers would fight to maintain their influence, and she had already begun to prepare for such an eventuality. She knew that the strength of the new alliance was its unity, and she was determined to ensure that nothing would drive them apart. It was at this moment that Earth's greatest strength was revealed: its people. The citizens of Earth, who had once been excluded and silenced, now stood as one. From every corner of the planet, people rallied to support their president and the vision of a united galaxy. Social media platforms buzzed with messages of solidarity, and grassroots movements took shape across the world, calling for an end to the old ways of politics and the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual respect. The power of Earth's united voice became impossible to ignore. The influence of the Galactic Council began to wane as the people of Earth refused to be manipulated. The misinformation campaigns were met with swift rebuttals, and the leaders of the neutral planets stood firm in their support of the alliance. Humanity had learned the hard way that power didn't lie in the hands of a few. It lay in the collective strength of many. As the weeks turned into months, the progress of the new communication network continued. The Galactic Council, seeing the resolve of humanity and its allies, reluctantly accepted the reality that things had changed. They realized that the galaxy could no longer be controlled by a few powerful factions. The future of the galaxy would be decided by those who had the courage to stand up for what was right, to challenge the old systems of power, and to build something new. President Morgan knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more attempts to divide and conquer. But she also knew that humanity had already proven its worth, that it was capable of great things, not because of its size or strength, but because of its unwavering belief in the potential of unity, cooperation, and progress. Earth was no longer a forgotten planet. It was a shining example of what could be achieved when people worked together for a common cause. And as the galaxy watched, humanity's influence continued to grow, not through violence or domination, but through the power of innovation, integrity, and hope. The coalition between Earth and the neutral planets had created a new model for galactic cooperation, a model based on respect, understanding, and shared prosperity. And as humanity took its place among the stars, it was clear that the galaxy would never be the same again.